Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome Faiz Siddiqui, celebrating the release of Hubris, Maximus, The Shattering of Elon Musk. Faiz Siddiqui is a reporter, or an economics reporter, who writes for the Washington Post and has covered companies such as Tesla, Uber, and Twitter, now X, for the business desk. His reporting has focused on transportation, social media, and government transformation, along with other issues. His work has been recognized by the Society of Advancing Business Editing and Writing, and he has earned multiple Society of Professional Journalists Marks of Excellence and Hearst Journalism Awards. His writing has also appeared in the Boston Globe and NPR. He will be in conversation with Noel King. King is the co-host and editorial director of Today Explained. Before joining Vox, she was a host of NPR's flagship show, Morning Edition, and the popular news podcast, Up First. Before joining Morning Edition, Noel was an economics reporter for 6 years at Planet Money and Marketplace. So please join me in welcoming our guest to Politics and Prose.
Hello.
Hi.
Testing.
We got a good crowd.
Excited to see everybody. Thank you for your interest in the book and maybe your interest in Elon. Hopefully it'll be an interesting conversation, maybe even a riveting one. Let's see.
All right, so you have very good timing.
I had nothing to do with this. I wrote it on time. But I was just telling Noel, Tuesday was quite a bad day for Tesla. Tesla's earnings were a bloodbath, and the book came out on Tuesday. And I was like, I promise you, this was not the plan. But the subtitle of the book is The Shattering of Elon Musk. So we're really digging in on what's gone wrong.
How long ago did you pitch this? When did you think, I want to write a book about Elon?
That is a good. So I covered Tesla for a few years before any of this, any of this felt like, all right, this is book worthy, or this is an ongoing story that I want to follow forever. Otherwise, it was just kind of this auto industry story. It was a car manufacturing story. Elon was controversial, but he was still just sort of recognized as this just purely heroic figure, the next Tony Stark. But then this funding secured scandal happens. He gets into this securities fraud scandal where he claims that he has the funding to take Tesla private. This publicly traded company, the stock pops. A bunch of investors are, they start believing this, and then a bunch of people are eventually going to lose money because it's that idea is going to come crumbling down. So I started covering Tesla right in the middle of that scandal, and I quickly realized this is the story. I don't understand why people aren't recognizing how strange and strangely powerful and how just how different this story is from every other tech story. Because you have to remember that around that time, the stories in Silicon Valley were Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, Uber, the rise of Uber, the fall of Uber, super pumped, the fall of Uber, great book. But there was not, in that traditional tech press, Tesla was still an automotive story, and
people just thought it's a car company.
It's a car
run
company.
by a guy with a big personality.
Yeah, and who does amazing and heroic things. And I have to say, at no point in the book do I try to take that away from Elon. I don't think the reporting in the book suggests it's not amazing to land a SpaceX rocket booster and catch it out of thin air with this chopstick style mechanism. I think I watched that, and like others, I was like, that's pretty incredible. But I started to see the other side of this, and that there was this kind of undercovered, underreported story, and it was not for lack of actual reporting. I think it was, DC brain, national politics brain, thinking this is going to be contained. And there was an element of that with me too, where it was no, he's not gonna he's not going to end up in the Trump administration.
Right, because as your book points out, I mean, back in the day, and the day is like 5 years ago, Elon Musk was a hero to many people on the left because of what his objectives were with his car company. Give us a sense of, before Elon got to the point where he is now, how does he become this heroic figure to people who are progressive in the US?
Yeah. So for the longest time, so electric cars were a dream of, Democrats, California liberals, Democratic administrations that invested in this. But they were kind of, loaded with compromise. The range wasn't so great. They had to be aerodynamic, so they had to be kind of interestingly shaped. They had to be, these lumbering, I think, econo boxes is kind of the way I refer to them in the book. And Teslas were not that. Like, you were not making the expected compromises of an electric car. This wasn't a Nissan Leaf, which was a fine car. I've owned a Nissan Leaf. But it wasn't a Nissan Leaf, and it wasn't a Prius. This was an aspirational, kind of like a halo car for people. And little kids saw Teslas, and they decided they wanted Teslas, and so that's how you knew this thing was going to blow up. And in San Francisco, they were everywhere. Like, every other car felt like it was a Tesla, and so that group of early adopters became very enthusiastic about the Teslas they were driving. At the same time, those people, dabbled in what else is Elon doing, and I think a lot of those people recognize, there's so much crossover between Tesla fans and SpaceX fans. Tesla wants to build a model that they strap a rocket to the back of. It's something Elon has promised to do one day. We'll see. And I don't doubt that he has the ability to do it, but it's just there was so much overlap between that fan community and what the company represented. Tesla's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So it was a deeply political one.
And so you have a guy who is, what's the word? He's married to the company, right? If you have a Tesla, you know who Elon Musk is. You know that he has this agenda, this clean energy agenda, and so you like him a lot. What was it about that tweet, when you started covering him, what was it about that tweet that made you think, wait, this guy is not behaving normally? There's something going on here that isn't normal CEO behavior.
So it wasn't the tweet itself, it was the fallout. Elon was at one point assigned a Twitter sitter, like a babysitter.
Oh, God. Like an adult in the room with him?
Yeah, by court order. Like his company market-moving tweets had to be approved by a securities lawyer. So it was, if you don't, and I didn't, I was, a transportation reporter, then a tech reporter. It's not like I was some securities guru, but you realize that what he did manipulated the market in real time, and it had real life consequences for people. I've seen people who testified about the way that affected their investment. But then I saw sort of the fallout from that. He has to pay a $20 million fine, which ends up, making investors whole. Tesla has to pay its own $20 million fine. He has to be removed as Tesla board chairman, and all of his communications have to be vetted and approved. Think about if you ran, like a toiletries company, and you said, we've just discovered a type of soap that is going to render all other soap obsolete. This is the best soap on Earth, and it's 99.9% more effective than others. Is that going to affect, other makers of bar soap? They might have an issue. So what Elon did is he told investors, hey, our company is being bought at a share price that it's not selling for openly, and we have the funding lined up for that sale to take place. Currently, the Tesla stock is trading at, let's say, $350. I think it was somewhere around that, and we're going to sell it for $420. All of a sudden, these assets that you hold, maybe you hold them in your retirement account or something, and they're worth significant percent of like 35% more. This is a big deal. And it's a big deal that they couldn't trust their CEO not to misbehave in that way.
Yeah, the misbehavior, was it a joke? Like, was there any sense that he was going to take the company private, or was he just popping off on Twitter? Like, how real was that?
So he's talked about how he was like sort of in a rush. He was on the way to the airport. As you know, we've all been there. So he was in a rush. He was on the way to the airport, and he got he had been talking. He says to Saudi investors about them potentially taking a stake in the company. A journalist asks him about those conversations, and Elon decides like, oh, he doesn't want the shareholders to hear this from a random journalist. You don't know what the journalist is going to include in their story. So he just fires off the tweet. He says, you know, as he's rushing to catch a plane, and then gets on a plane, it catches pretty much everyone below him by surprise, below him literally, and below him in terms of their position. He's like just in the air at at this moment, and he's now going to have to put out this insane fire.
Okay, so I think a very important question about Elon Musk is, did he understand, like we go back and forth about like how smart is Elon Musk exactly? Is he a genius? Is he a genius who has like some aspects of idiocy about him? Or is he just kind of dumb? When he tweeted and then faced all of this trouble, these fines, did he understand what he was doing? Like, did he say to himself, I'm in a rush, I'm on my way to a plane, but it's a big deal what I'm about to do?
So you don't have to be a genius to understand that, like, tweeting that type of market-moving information as the CEO of a publicly traded company is a risk, and is just, like, even if it's not a violation, which in this case it was determined to be, it's at least something that you should think twice about. And I don't know that that same risk calculation takes place here. It does, like, based on his public comments, it sounds like he was sort of rushing to, intervene in some way.
So this sets your book down its narrative path. From there, you help us understand Elon Musk's attitude toward Washington and toward regulators, the kind of people who are going to say, oh, you can't just go around tweeting that, you have to pay a fine. As you start covering him, as you start following the story, how do you see his attitude toward Washington taking shape?
It's just sort of like a thorn in his side. I don't think there's an inherent recognition or respect for processes, like long bureaucratic, these sort of rabbit holes that companies have to go down, especially a company in California. And I think there are probably legitimate criticisms of like how, like, the amount of paperwork that is required to do like basic things. Environmental impact studies are, I'm sure, a thorn in the sides of people in these positions. But there's a reason that some of these protocols exist, right? And so the book opens with an anecdote about a gentleman, an Apple engineer, who's in his late 30s. He's commuting to work using Tesla Autopilot, which is like a advanced type of cruise control, but like it doesn't make the car drive itself. Even though it might feel like it, it's not something that you can go to sleep in, recline your seat, close your eyes. So this gentleman puts a lot of trust in autopilot. He's an enthusiast. He fires up a video game on his phone, and his car ends up crashing into like a highway barrier, and he loses his life. And it goes into the fact that Musk's reaction to the scrutiny over this crash, the government takes a huge interest in this because this is one of the first crashes of its kind. It's automation meets like highway safety. This is like what the NTSB does. So they start asking questions about this, and they lay out, a process that Tesla has to follow, which is that, we're going to work together to get to the bottom of this type of crash to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again. And Elon at one point is just not having it, and he hangs up on the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board after berating him over the fact that he thinks that ultimately this kind of scrutiny is going to cost lives. That's another point that I wanted to make, that some of what was happening with Tesla felt so much bigger than, and it's not to criticize tech reporting. I think, the reporting on Uber was like insane, and the reporting on Facebook was really good. And like they reported on the Myanmar, genocide. Like that reporting was incredibly important. What was happening at Tesla felt a lot like what I was seeing as a transportation reporter. Like there were people, being killed in crashes, and by looking at it, we could get to the bottom, I hoped, of like what this new phenomenon is, and like how big of an impact is this company having on our roads that has not been seen in 40 years. Road deaths are, there are so many. There are 40,000 annual road deaths, and so the criticism, and I think it's a fair one, is like why don't you examine every road death? Like what about our road design is causing that, and why are you just focusing on this one company? But this was like a new phenomenon.
You lay out that and I thought this was really well done, he feels targeted. He sort of says, look, one guy died in a Tesla, sure, but one of the things he says about this autopilot feature is that it's going to make driving much, much safer down the road, right? None of us will have to do our own driving. It'll all be computers. Everything's computer.
Everything's computer.
He has this sense that he's being persecuted, that he's trying to do a good thing. One guy screws up, and all of a sudden the government is on poor Elon. Is that, in terms of like a CEO reaction or the leader of a company reaction, how different is that from the way any other CEO might receive this news?
So companies have, this is not to say that companies always follow the process or companies don't fight back. Two big automotive scandals were like Ford Explorers rolling over. I think this was like late 90s, early 2000s. This was a huge scandal. And sticky floor pedals with the Toyota Prius. Like the manner of the behavior from Elon felt different, but in my recollection, in some of those previous automotive scandals, there was like, I don't know, it's like people didn't fall completely in line. It was just that coming directly from the CEO and like not cooperating even with the safety investigation, that felt like relatively new territory. And also just sort of the brashness, like the attitude that like, I am so confident that what you're doing is wrong and that what we're doing is right, that I don't have to cooperate with you people. And that, that's Hubris Maximus.
It's Hubris Maximus. From there, the book skips ahead to COVID, which is, as you lay out, a moment where things for Elon Musk really seem to shift. Tell us what happened with his California factories in COVID and what his response was like at the time. Do you want to switch? Let's switch. I project really well, so.
Hello. All good.
Got it.
Where were we? Okay, COVID.
Yeah.
So Elon gets to like, so we get to March 2020, and like imagine what that was like just in general. It's just sort of a weird time. And things are closing down. In California, just to lay it out for you, because I feel like DC was a little bit delayed on this, but then DC was hit like insanely hard. California was like first in the country, besides maybe Washington, to like start shutting down. And like these orders are coming from on high. Like you have to shelter in place, you have to shut down like manufacturing, and essentially like you will pause that indefinitely. I think there was some guidance on like this is going to be so many weeks, but then they keep extending it. Tesla was in a really crucial time for the company. It had seemingly recovered from a lot of the scandals. Elon was still the CEO. They had launched the Model Y, which was going to be their best-selling car. And another one of the scandals, the pedo guy scandal, he refers to this Thai cave rescue diver.
A man who did heroic things.
He smears this guy. But Elon is still like the CEO, and it's March 2020, and some of these problems are behind him, and the company is about to like get launched onto this glide path with the Model Y, and then the factory has to shut down. And it's another case of, first of all, Elon is absent, as I write, during that period. You know, he is not showing up. He is deliberately not answering phone calls because he doesn't want any money to flow out of the company during the shutdowns. So, you know, if you're trying to spend any money to keep basic things running at Tesla, and you're like a high-level person at Tesla, your company credit card, if it's not working, you cannot reach Elon. He does not want any money going out. And he's just fuming over these closures. And he also newly has a lot of time on his hands, and he is a man with a Twitter habit. So you really start to see a shift, and you start to see for the first time some of that like brashness, that anger. He starts to air it at at politicians who are standing in the way of what Tesla wants to be doing, which is not be told by the state or the county that they can't be operating.
There were, I think everybody in this room is old enough to remember March of 2020. A lot of business owners felt similarly, right? We both interviewed them. The government is going to take me out of business. I can't afford to do this. Oh my God. What, in your estimation, what made Elon Musk different from the thousands of other business owners who would freely curse the government for making them pause operations?
Yeah, that's interesting because so it was the first Trump administration, and I think the first Trump administration, obviously the response to COVID in general was another thing, and then the retconning of that response. But around that time, a lot of the guidance on COVID was coming from the federal government under the Trump administration. So I don't think there was a rush to defend any of this anger or consternation. No one knew what we were really dealing with. When Elon starts to speak for that aggrieved business owner, Trump backs him, which sort of seemingly goes against the early COVID guidance. Trump is like, yes, Elon, you open back up. I can't remember what his exact tweet was, but it was something to that effect. And Elon becomes a hero to a lot of people for defying these county orders. And so he is egged on in doing this. The other thing is Tesla promised workers that if they didn't want to come back, they would be allowed to take leave from the company for an extended period. But then people didn't come back, and they found they were getting termination letters.
The Elon becomes a hero, but he's clearly becoming a hero at this point with his violation of the orders, his anger, very public anger at the orders. He's becoming heroic to a very different kind of person, right? This is not the progressives who drive Teslas.
Yeah, but I think this was kind of the canary in the coal mine for what was about to happen, because he was becoming a hero, I think, to that liberal California. It's part of that set that maybe they would go on to vote for Biden, but certainly this was not the traditional conservative or MAGA crowd. This was a group of largely rich guys, founders, investors, venture capitalists who felt like Elon was on the right side of this. And that set, would go on to end up aligned with the current president.
Do you think it matters that Elon was making a thing? He's a Silicon Valley guy, but he's actually making a physical product. He's not doing Facebook.
I think that's easier to defend than, imagine if he was just a venture capitalist, or if he was making, selling advertising at scale, then it's much harder to see.
But he's an American automaker, and that hits a bit different.
I think
How
that's
did
right.
Tesla do coming out of COVID? He says, okay, we're going back to the office, and then what happens at the company?
So this is another theme of the book. The advantages are achieved by skirting guardrails or breaking rules. So Tesla reopens. It doesn't pause its assembly lines, or it doesn't pause its supply chain. So it's in place. It's exactly where it needs to be. Where the other automakers are oh, these closures are going to go on for a while. We need to pause things. We need to wind down our operation. Tesla was ready to go like that. and its stock just ends up on the glide path, and it becomes the world's most valuable automaker, surpassing Toyota, and Elon becomes the world's richest person.
So he would likely argue, to give him his due, he would likely say, look, I flouted the law, but look what happened to my company.
Yeah, I mean,
It grew, it thrived.
I would be remiss not to mention like the human fallout from that kind of thing, which is, we reported as, there's an individual who follows Tesla very closely, who tracks down records on the company. He ends up with this data that shows there were hundreds of COVID cases tied to the Tesla factory. That doesn't necessarily mean they got COVID in the factory, but it means that, those cases, but for this reopening, this data would not be associated with Tesla, right? And so people got sick, and I reported on a case, early case, like in the factory, and I reported on people who, had people who were, relatives who had chronic illnesses or comorbidities who, did not want to be put in that position. And you have to remember, this is early to mid 2020, however you may feel, at this point, this was not the time that discussion was happening. It was like, no, let's make sure people are healthy. Let's make sure people are safe. This is not a time that people were really thinking about generating shareholder value.
Yeah. Okay, so COVID flips some switch for Elon, or turns the switch up a notch higher. And then the next beat seems to be Twitter, yeah?
Yeah, so Tesla starts to reopen, and it becomes the world's most valuable automaker. Elon becomes this whole different kind of celebrity. He says, like, screw you guys, I'm moving to Texas because of what had happened in California with the closure. There's a lot happening. He names his kid XAE-A12, X-Ash A12. X-Ash Archangel, I think, actually.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful name.
And, the company's in a decent spot, and he just can't like rest on his laurels. At the beginning of 2022, he starts accumulating Twitter shares. And for a couple of months, it's not publicly known. This is another SEC thing. You do have to disclose once you become a 5% owner in a company. Like, you have to, once you surpass that threshold, make clear that that's the case. Otherwise, you're buying the stock at an artificially deflated price. So that deadline passes. Elon doesn't, disclose. This is according to the SEC, at least, which has now sued him over it. So he buys Twitter. He buys it for $44 billion. A lot of people said he was overpaying. And he transforms it. I mean, I go into this in the book. It ends up being a completely different mission than, what Twitter was. And Twitter was not, great. It was not a great place to be. But his idea is to turn it into this quote unquote everything app.
The change in Elon Musk you can see in the way that he tweets, in what he has endorsed on Twitter, in sort of the far right-wing stuff that he's become involved with, in the welcoming of people who have alt-right views, far-right views. Was that, and I really asked this on behalf of the people who thought he was Tony Stark, like, was that always in there? Was that always in Elon, do you think?
So he goes from existential threat to existential threat. Like, he identifies something as the thing he needs to chase. So it might be climate change, or it might be, he thinks, he thinks there's a population crisis and people need to have more babies. He thinks that our planet, if it becomes uninhabitable, we need to establish, a colony on another planet, Mars. And the new existential crisis that he identifies is the woke mind virus, quote, the woke mind virus. And so you can imagine that, if he now sees, progressive politics as a virus, he's suddenly empowered and empowering himself to do whatever it takes to eradicate that. And he starts to see just sort of basic expressions of progressive political beliefs, especially post-COVID.
Yeah.
So if you think about that summer, with the killing of George Floyd and the racial justice demonstrations, he starts to see those as, and this is later on as we're getting into 2022, booting Trump off of Twitter after January 6th. He starts to see all these things as, threats. And he vows to do whatever he can to eradicate those.
Even within his own family, it seems like he starts to see the woke mind virus.
His daughter, on, I believe, her 18th birthday, files paperwork to officially change her name, and his daughter transitions. And Elon feels that deeply, but in a way that, like, you got to think, imagine, your father saying, my child is dead, and that's how Elon reacted. And she, I will point out, she wrote on Threads, "I look pretty good for a dead bitch."
So you copped on very early that there was something about Elon Musk that was very different. Even for, a confident CEO, Elon Musk was willing to go steps further than any other. The way he is entrenched in the Trump administration now, his relationship with Trump, and how far he's gone on Twitter, praising the AfD in Germany, for example. Do you feel like way back when you started covering him and you were like, something is up with this guy and I don't think other people are noticing it? Did you predict this is where it was going? Like, how much of this is a shock to you?
I would love to take credit. No.
Okay.
I thought this was going somewhere potentially like strange. Like there was an earnings call during COVID. And I write about this in the book, like my reaction to this. There was an earnings call where Elon just starts like swearing and just like he's furious over the closures. He says like, give people back their freedom in explicit terms. And like he's just like so mad that it feels like someone prompted him to like take a break. I don't know if that's what happened, but like certainly my reaction to it was like, I called my editor and I was like, this is not a normal earnings call. This is going to be a thing. Because these are typically like in other companies, like pretty boring. It's just like, here's the release of some numbers, quarterly requirement that we're meeting. But Elon just like rages on this call. And so I'm like, something's going on that's like unusual and like very noteworthy. But the political pivot in general, like Elon was saying around that time, like, I prefer to stay out of politics at all. And it didn't feel like disingenuous. It was more like, politics is just like, he's much more of a opportunist, with his politics, where he'll like donate to somebody or he will, get close to somebody who could be helpful, or who, boosts him in his work.
Standard business owner stuff.
Sure.
I will endorse you. I will vote for you if I think you're going to do something that's helpful for my business.
Sure. Yeah.
But most business owners, and we're going to turn this over to audience questions in just a second. I'll make this my last one for now. Most business owners don't desire to go into the federal government and like remake it, right? So I wonder how. I wonder where you position, a lot of people say, oh, Elon does like to move fast and break things. He did it with Twitter. He's done it with other companies. Do you see what he's doing with the federal government now as part of the theme, part of the way in which he conducts his,
Yeah, so the part of the book that's about Twitter, like there are so many parallels to exactly what happened at Doge. Late night, there's this like late night email to Twitter staff that's like, going forward, we're going to need to be extremely hardcore. If you're receiving this email, you basically agree to commit to a hardcore Twitter, or we'll accept your resignation. The same thing happened with the federal government. It was, this fork in the road email, same title even, as the Twitter subject line. We're in a place where we need you to commit to this, and if you're not willing to do that, resign. A little side story on that. I found out about that email because 2 years earlier during COVID, I had desperately needed a gaming computer. Everyone needed something to do.
Everyone needed something. It's true.
So I met somebody off of Craigslist, and I picked up a gaming computer, and then I get like a midnight text from somebody on a chat app that is very popular in DC right now, and I'm like immediately like, is this about Twitter? And the person is like, yeah, we met a few years ago. You wanted to pick up a gaming laptop. I'm like, thank God that I mentioned to that person that I'm a journalist.
Wow.
The person is like, Elon just issued us an ultimatum. I work for Twitter.
Incredible sourcing. Incredible.
That is one where I'll toot my own horn. I'm like, damn, good job,
deserve
Faiz. You told that person, like, tell absolutely everybody what you do because you never know.
Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to? All right.
Blake. Should I hand my mic?
Yeah.
I don't. This is not a person I trust.
Hi, Mr. Siddiqui. I had a question for you. So, Elon Musk has lived a lot of lives. He was a tech transportation guru. Now he's kind of a successful political guru. But between that, he was a pop culture figure. Like, he had a relationship with Grimes. He went to the Met Gala. SNL.
Azalea Banks.
Azalea Banks. We won't talk about the tweet. What do you think his current place in pop culture is? And in maybe 50 years, when he's no longer in the zeitgeist, how will he be remembered?
Wow. That's good, Blake. That is good. Wow. I don't feel like that equipped to answer that. Like, he was such a staple of California, like, that life. If Elon showed up at something, like, it was a thing. And it kind of feels now like the first Trump administration where, like, if Trump shows up and does SNL, like, that is, like, that's too far. I imagine there might be some of that reaction to, Elon. If you think about the Chappelle Show, big stadium event in San Francisco that, the crowd boos Elon. And it's like very humiliating for him, clearly, because Elon's like, Dave, like, what do I do? Like, this is a very uncomfortable situation. Like, I don't know that he has that. If Elon showed up here, it would be a big event, I think. So we would love to interview him. But if he just like goes and shows up places, I don't know that it has the same pull that it did in 2019. But your 50 years question is really interesting. Like, I think we humans have the capacity to like retcon like anything, right? We can be like, oh wait, that guy was kind of, what an icon. Like, what did he tweet? That's nuts. Like, what's Twitter? So I don't know. I could see his legacy being pretty strong in 50 years. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll add to that. There have been, I feel like there have been instances of this where it's like people who do like insane things and you're like, oh, at the tail end of that, like they became a little bit problematic. And I just kind of wonder if that ends up being like, there's an asterisk.
I mean, if he gets us to Mars, like, so my question for you is, having spent a lot of time in this man's head, like, what I really do appreciate about your book is you don't claim that he doesn't deserve credit for what he's done. And I wonder, again, being a transportation reporter, having followed, he's weird, but also he's been very successful. And part of that has to do with, he clearly has a very big brain. Do you think the Mars thing is, what do you think that is? Possible?
So there's a section where somebody asks Elon, like, okay, like, we're going to be able to get to Mars, like, human intelligence, like our capacity, for scientific advancement is increasing exponentially all the time. Like, we're gonna get there. We are a small blip in human history. 20,000 years from now, you don't know what's gonna happen. And somebody will probably be able to do it. So like, why do this? And Elon says he wants to be the one to do it. you know? And is that the reason to do things? I don't know. Like, people, you know, there's an argument that if he didn't say that, then we would never do it. That at some point, somebody has to put their foot down and say, like, all right, you know, why isn't Mars possible?
For
Let's
people
do it
who
now.
get things done. Yeah, you think probably the defining characteristic of people who get things done is they say, I'm going to get it done, right? I mean, it's not a normal goal. It's an outsized goal. But most of his goals have been outsized, although I think you do document that he's made promises, especially with respect to like transportation here on Earth, that he hasn't fulfilled.
Yeah. Yes. There's a lot that's just like pure bluster. And like, even if he delivers on the goal, like, I'm thinking back to what I just said about the strapping a rocket engine to the back of the Tesla Roadster, like, the hurdles are innumerable. But then the counterexample is like, people said this about the Cybertruck, and we just saw one on our way here.
We all did.
Yeah,
we all saw that
we're all
one
stuck
truck.
in that traffic. So, you know, he might be late, but it still could happen.
What do you think the objective of Doge is? Like, is he trying to get my DNA? Does he want my social security number? Does he really want government to be smaller? Like, what do you think he really wants out of all of this?
I think he wants to know, like, what we have, what's in the logs. He may very well think the government has grown too big and bloated, and there are ways of addressing that do not require the approach of sort of barging in and like not asking questions and just gaining as much access as possible. He'll claim that, like, if I didn't do that, then, you know, the corrupt bureaucrats would like cover their tracks. But as we see with Twitter in here, like, they did the same thing at Twitter. They like were name searching Slack, or I think their messaging platform was Slack, for Elon's name, like, to look for people bad-mouthing him. And like, what did they do at Doge? They got in, they got access to the agencies, they onboarded their people so that the existing people would be disempowered. And they're not going to hit their goal of cutting $1 trillion in spending this year. Elon recently said it would be 150 billion. So then where does that leave you? That's a lot of money that you've cut from the federal budget, but you also have gotten in, like, you are in these agencies. And regardless of whether Elon leaves at the end of May, those people who have been onboarded, there's no telling like how long they'll remain inside as many as 7 different federal agencies.
Do you have a guess as to whether he's going to leave?
It seems likely based on what's going on with Tesla. It's like a bit of a crisis for the company, and he also has I think it's a statutory requirement to leave after 130 days as a special government employee, because otherwise you need to disclose like a lot of conflicts of interest publicly, and there's just like a lot of you know, public-facing work that needs to be done that like he doesn't have an appetite for.
I'm ready to keep going, but I just want to ask if anybody else. Yeah.
Oh, sure. There's also the family aspect. And in Walter Isaacson's book, I really was disappointed that he didn't go through more of that. And certainly with Elon, there are family members around him, the mom, for example. But I was kind of surprised. Elon Musk is a piece of work, an interesting character. But the grandfather, Maximus' father, was a so-called technocratist of the 1930s and 40s. And they liked Hitler and Mussolini, and he ultimately got jailed after World War II started. And then he ultimately emigrated to South Africa because he liked apartheid. And so you've got, I mean, does the fruit fall that far from the tree?
I like to view everybody as like individually on their own laurels, but I understand that like probing Elon's psyche cannot be done without understanding like how he was raised. The fact that he was bullied, the fact that, as another book referred to it, like his childhood was psychological torture. And I was just on a story with a colleague where we looked into Elon's upbringing. in apartheid era South Africa, and like the ways that they would talk about that time. And I think Isaacson's book does this a bit too. It's like that was a time of great anguish for the Musk family, and it's like, what, like, is that, if that's your memory of that time, and like that, it may be true that like they struggled more than they would have, but you're white folks in apartheid South Africa, like if you don't have the capacity to recognize like the flaw with that kind of thinking, then, you know, how can you imbue that, you know, on somebody else? And one thing I've also learned is, like, I had somebody who had once been close to Elon who was like, you guys think that like this is somebody with the capacity to recognize a double standard, and like that's just not part of the calculation for Elon. So it's just something to remember when you're like, hey, that's hypocritical. Well, whatever, who are you? Referring to all of us who are asking these critical questions.
Then there's also the what is it, techno-authoritarian movement of Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin and things. But apparently Musk himself was rather apolitical early on, and only kind of went more so maybe after COVID, I guess. I don't know.
I think there were, you know, what else was there? Effective altruism. But Elon is pro-natalist, like at this point. I think, what's the count on the kids?
14.
I think, yeah, so like he has these philosophies, and it's hard to disconnect them from politics. Isn't everything politics?
But you said, and I think this is a good insight, he leaps from crisis to crisis. And so possibly, potentially, I mean, we've seen the way he's evolved over the last decade. He decides that something else is his next big crisis. Starts voting Democrat again. I don't know. I mean, do you think Elon now is where Elon will be 4 years from now, politically in particular?
No. Only because I see how political alliances can be like, and like political moments can like just sweep over everything and just like overtake, you know, and sort of sideline like another movement so quickly. Like even like Democratic politics feel far removed from what they were in 2016, and Republican politics are not where they were in 2008. And you know, if the next movement is the one to align with to get humanity on Mars, like Elon would not hesitate to align with that one. And you know, that could be. I don't want to like insinuate that these are in any way the same, but both Elon and Ezra Klein have been using the term abundance a lot. Ezra Klein's book is Abundance. And Elon keeps talking about unlocking, like, you know, abundance. And it's like you see these flashes of there's like some pragmatism here, or there's some like, you know, there is a form of politics that does not include all of this overt nastiness that, you know, could also unleash a tech utopia. If that one swept the country, would Elon align with it? It doesn't seem like it right now, but history has shown, you know, he would ally with whoever would benefit his companies.
Yeah, his priorities are clear, not necessarily a bad thing. Did he know you were writing this book? I'm sure you reached out. Did you get to talk to him at all?
I didn't get to interview him for the book. He has emailed me a couple of times. The comments were, give my regards to your puppet master, and for the 100th time, give my regards to your puppet master. So that was the extent of it.
What do you feel like what would you have gotten out of an interview with him? Like, what do you regret about not getting to sit down with him?
I don't think and I'll caveat this with like, I think like podcasters who do 3-hour-long interviews get a lot out of people. Like I really do. I think those formats are very useful, and I like watch them. I put them on YouTube and fall asleep. Not lately, but I don't think he has done the like traditional media sit down where he is grilled and asked like critical questions about, you know, all of the types of things that I raise. And I just think it would be worth it to see like how it's an insight into how he thinks, like his critical thinking, his logical reasoning. Like Don Lemon tried it and Elon was very unhappy with it and like booted him off. He canceled his X contract, I believe.
Yeah, that was a whole, Lemon was asking him normal journalistic questions and Elon acted like it was betrayal of some sort. Yeah.
So it's just not something he likes to subject himself to. And honestly, I get it. I'm not trying to like both sides of that. I just kind of get it. Like I really do enjoy the, you know, extended length interview to see who somebody is as a human. But we've gotten that from Elon. Like
Yeah.
he did that and he like smoked weed on it. Like we've seen it.
Do you think, sorry, you brought up weed. We're going to wrap fairly soon. Does anyone have any other questions? We've got one here.
Yeah, my question is, can you think of any time that Elon Musk has actually changed his mind? And relatedly, well, I think it's relatedly, what explains Peter Thiel and the rest of the PayPal mafia suddenly reabsorbing Elon Musk? I mean, it's kind of strange that Peter Thiel doesn't say anything negative about Elon Musk, despite the level of acrimony and fallout between them. It's like they went from being worst enemies to best friends again. And it's very strange.
Well, I'll take the second one first. There's like expedience, political expedience. There's like Thiel's utopia has been unleashed, you know, right? And like in his mind, I'm sure. And so like it would have been really damaging to that prospect to make an enemy of Elon publicly at this point. They don't have to be best friends, but I think these guys they have like fraternized over this idea of, you know, these woke people have ruined our fantasy. On Elon changing his mind, he can be convinced that like, you know, a particular path might not be the best one. Elon, I read about in the book about how he had this, it's hard to imagine, but he had this, is this working? Yeah, he had this idea for the Cybertruck that was like this horrific monstrosity, and that's not what was built. So like, what was built was like the alternative, and so you have to, I'm like kind of mad that I don't have a picture of the monstrosity.
Oh, you saw it?
And no, it's been described to me. So he had his mind changed on that. He was like, yeah, that's better. Like he will listen to his subordinates, but it requires a lot of evidence. It's on that. I will say there is an element of like a science-based approach. Like, you know, present me your best argument, make the case, and like I will take this into consideration.
Does the move toward Trump, does that represent mind change?
Actually, yeah, that's a great one. Because in 2022, Trump said, you know, I had an Oval Office meeting with Elon a couple years ago, and I could have gotten him to drop to his knees and beg. And Elon said, you know, you should have sailed off into the sunset. And now they are here together.
Now they are here together indeed. Any last questions before we wrap?
So, hey.
Hi, Julian.
Hey. So Elon Musk is, like, by one side portrayed as, like, you know, this visionary and, you know, a brilliant business genius. And I think, like, by maybe another camp as, you know, sort of this grifter who didn't really, you know, make his, you know, build this empire, you know, with his own hands, essentially. And I just was wondering, you know, through your reporting, like what you found, you know, and where the truth lies in between those two visions.
Okay, so anyone who thinks that so I get this question about like whether he was really the founder of Tesla, and like the way to answer that is like he is legally a founder of Tesla, but the people who started the company are two gentlemen named Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpening, and like sure, like if you want to have that on him, like that's a thing to have on him, but like does the Roadster get built without Elon? It seems like maybe a highly compromised version that didn't like nearly kill the company would get built. Or does autopilot happen without Elon? Again, like one that is like way less functional or like doesn't feel as magical. So to answer your question, like it is true that he benefited from, you know, skirting guardrails and cutting corners. I don't know that that makes him like, what was it, like a grifter? I don't think that makes him a grifter. It might make him like, you know, I don't know. There are all kinds of criticisms of that approach. A scofflaw, but is that a fun one to use? Like, it's a fun word to say. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does.
Hi, Faiz. To ask like a short-term question, what happens in like the next month or two? I mean,
Trisha is asking this because she covers Tesla.
and I want to know what should we write about next? Yeah, what happens after May? Let's say look forward to June or July. Where is Elon Musk?
I'm looking forward to a very quiet period on my own beat, which is Doge, and like yours might be kind of crazy.
Switch.
I think him going back, like he's in another moment of crisis, and the investors want him to focus. And if he doesn't fix it, there's going to be a whole new round of questions about whether he's fit, you know, to do this job, and whether this is like really what he wants to do. Actually, like it's funny. For a while, I was like, okay, like this beat, like we've gotten to like the extent of what this beat is going to be. Like I don't feel like there are new crazy Tesla stories in my future. And then I feel like Elon like lost interest. Like Elon was slowly like losing interest. The investors just wanted him to like focus on the damn thing, and like he keeps having to return to it. You know, he keeps ending up in this crisis situation, and the investors are like, Elon, please just focus on this one thing. And like, so if he focuses, it'll be a really interesting time for the company, because that's when you get Cybertruck. Can you, yeah.
Okay, last one. My question is, do you think he likes the press, or do you think he likes the spectacle? And like, would he ever go back to being a kind of, you know, the classic Silicon Valley person is like a genius who's kind of like in their own little bubble? Like, it seems like he really likes the attention of this political, you know, being on stage and things like that. And I worry in this, I'm not worried, but I'm curious if you think in the next stage after politics, his next business adventure, will he ever turn off the media, or does he like the attention?
He loves it. He loves it. But it's not the press. It's X. It's, you know, he's now the most followed person on X. Trump was the most followed person on X. You know, X was, I think it was Casey Newton maybe who reported that like, or Zoe Schiffer from Platformer who reported that like Elon drove, or Elon's X drove traffic like directly to his feed. I don't think he sees the press as useful for that type of, he sees it, I'm sure, as a necessary evil, but like he doesn't see it as particularly like useful in that regard. If you look at who's famous on X, like these are not, these are people who have built their entire followings natively on there. And I think Elon is content to and would feel more fulfilled in having that reputation